Their Excellencies, the Governor General, the Most Honorable Sir Patrick Allen, and the Most Honorable Lady Allen, the Most Honorable Portia Simpson Miller, President of the Senate, Dr. the Honorable Oswald Harding and Mrs. Harding, Madam Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honorable Marissa Dalrymple Philibert and Mr. Philibert, former Governor General, the Most Honorable Sir Kenneth Hall and Lady Hall, the Most Honorable Edward Siaga, and the Most Honorable Mrs. Siaga. And the Honorable Bruce Golding and Mrs. Golding. Madam Chief Justice, the Honorable Mrs. Justice McCalla and Mr. McCalla. President of the Court of Appeal, the Honorable Justice Panton and Mrs. Panton. Honorable members of the former cabinet. President of the Jamaica Council of Churches, the Most Reverend Donald Rees, Archbishop Emeritus, members of the Diplomatic Corps, my fellow Jamaicans. It is with a deep sense of honor and humility that I took the oath of office a few moments ago, cognizant of the awesome responsibility that I have just assumed. I want to express appreciation to all those who have reposed confidence in me. I want to acknowledge my wife, my parents, my family, my colleagues in Parliament on both sides, the constituents of West Central St. Andrew, the Ministry of Education, and the great number of Jamaicans who have supported me over the years, represented by an elderly lady who held on to my hands. I believe she's in the audience, and she said, "Son, I'm praying for you." Rest assured, I'm totally focused on the task of helping the Jamaican people realize their hopes and aspirations. I pledge to serve the people of Jamaica faithfully with all my energies, all of my heart, mind, and soul. This is the pattern of service that has been established by my predecessors. And at this moment, I want to pay tribute to them and thank them on behalf of all Jamaicans for their unselfish service to our great nation. In particular, I pay special tribute to the Honorable Bruce Golding, who through hard work, commitment, and selflessness inspired his cabinet and parliamentary colleagues to higher levels of service. I was born to working-class parents in Spanish Town on the 22nd of July, 1972, 10 years after Jamaica's independence in 1962. 5 months after Michael Manley won his first election, he appointed P.J. Pattison as Minister of Industry and Tourism in his cabinet, and Bruce Golding entered Parliament for the first time. Two years later, in 1974, Edward Seaga would become leader of the opposition. And Portia Simpson Miller entered the KCAC as a councillor for the first time. While I was not around when Jamaica took independence, from all accounts, it was a period of great excitement, great hopes, and great expectations. Oh, to have experienced the birth of a nation, a clean slate, endless horizons, greatness within sight and within grasp. It must have been a glorious time, an optimistic time, a positive time. It was a time of political honor and mutual respect, where I'm told JLP and PNP supporters were welcomed at each other's meetings. And the only thing that was thrown were words in good humor. The prospective spirit of the entrepreneurial sector was high then. Statistics show that we had the fastest and highest levels of growth during that period. However, as we moved into the 70s, impatience with inequality and unresolved social issues in the Jamaican society grew. Colonial institutions, 300 years in the making, and the social structures and injustices they created could not be reversed in one decade of independence. Globally, Jamaica was very much intertwined in the growing struggle for civil rights, true freedom, and respect for the black race. Our intellectuals, like Garvey, inspired other leaders to continue the struggle, and Marley provided the medium through music to carry the message of freedom, upliftment, and self-assertion worldwide. Another global struggle was in play at that time, the Cold War. Though different in origin, it was connected by the confluence of geopolitics and hegemonic desires of superpowers. Again, Jamaica would feature prominently and be caught up in the struggle. With so much trouble in the world, as Marley described it at the time, the decade of the 70s must have been, and is generally agreed to be, the most turbulent and divisive time in Jamaica's independent history. I was not a part of that ferment or foment. As a student of politics and as a child exposed to politics as I was, I understand and appreciate both sides of the debate and struggles of the time. As a result of the struggles of the 70s, it is clear that we have developed a more progressive social structure. We have secured more rights and respect for our people. We have become more assertive and expressive of who we are. All this is necessary in building a nation. However, we have also carried with us from the 70s a polarized politics, a mean-spirited politics, an uncooperative politics, and a violent politics. The basis of the struggles of the 70s was true freedom. However, the politics then created garrisons that enslaved our own people, created lines of demarcation dividing our people, created free space in which crime can flourish and where the Jamaican state is challenged by criminal gangs. The struggles of the 70s should have created a more equitable society. However, in those very struggles, we lost the fundamental respect for law, order, and public virtue, the basis on which more equitable societies are built. Without this healthy and universal respect for law, order, public virtue, our institutions can be corrupted. And worse, corruption becomes acceptable. Where there is corruption, there is inefficiency, there is injustice, inequity, and inequality. The struggles of the 70s should have given more power and rights to the people. But power and rights cannot be divorced from responsibility. Sovereignty requires responsibility. Responsibility embraces truth. Unfortunately, a kind of social, economic, and political irresponsibility has followed us throughout the decades, from men not taking responsibility for their children, to communities not taking responsibility for public spaces, to lack of accountability in government. The ferment of the 70s was aimed not only to give social and political voice to the poor, but was also to have given economic empowerment to the poor. The inability of successive governments since the 70s to have a sincere and respectful discussion with the poor about a practical approach to economic development has led to a delaying of the inevitable confrontation of our national debt. We cannot continue to borrow more than we produce in value. This is the surest way to continue poverty. The lack of fiscal discipline is the greatest injustice visited on the working class masses of Jamaica. I entered representational politics approximately 35 years after independence. My outlook and perspectives are not shaped by the events of the 70s, which have cast a long shadow over our politics. Further, I have been influenced and motivated by the frustration of the mass of well-thinking Jamaicans who have been turned off by the politics of our country and who continue to be disillusioned, but who are still looking for a reason to believe. Like many Jamaicans, I was frustrated with the political process that emerged out of the 70s. Some chose the path of pursuing change from without. I chose the path of pursuing change from within. This path has not been easy. It has required the ability to grapple with the issues and wrestle with the politics as it is, without being compromised. Being in the system, I have seen where genuine efforts have been made under successive administrations, sometimes with the support of civil society and sometimes totally led by civil society, to transform Jamaica. Understanding the complexities, I am now in a position to continue the management of the change that Jamaicans want to see. And I want to give credit to those who have worked from within and without for change. As a result, we have made progress in many areas of national life, and we must continue with that progress. We have come a far way with our electoral system. It is not perfect, but it is much better than what we had 30 years ago. This is a great example of politicians and civil society working together to build national institutions. I am committed to continuing the progress in this area. Legislation regarding party registration and financing, campaign financing, and other electoral matters will have the support of the government in Parliament. We are making progress in fighting corruption, and there are several pieces of legislation designed to bring greater transparency and oversight to public administration, including the new anti-corruption bill and amendments to the procurement regulations, which will have the support of the government in Parliament. We are making progress in the modernizing of the police force. Jamaica has benefited from the national security cooperation we have pursued with our bilateral partners. This cooperation must be continued and intensified. In parallel, we are making progress in crime fighting. We cannot relax on crime at this point, and we will bring to Parliament very soon anti-gang legislation to address the threat of organized crime. We are making progress in transforming and modernizing our education system. All the gains we have made towards attaining universal literacy must be consolidated and intensified. The new institutions we have built and the new programs we have implemented must be given time to work. We will be taking to Parliament shortly bills to enshrine the Jamaica Teaching Council into law, and we are working on laws for safety and security in schools, school improvement facilitation, and greater parental participation in education. We have made progress in the reform of the justice system, both in terms of infrastructure and administration. We have passed the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedom. The work we are doing in justice must be continued and accelerated. We have developed a framework to reform the public sector. This is designed to improve the efficiency and efficacy of government. The recommendations from the task force must be implemented with as much consensus as possible, but as quickly as possible. We have made progress generally in the economy. The Jamaica Debt Exchange shows how much we can accomplish if we are willing to cooperate and make sacrifices. Today, we have the benefit of a stable dollar, the lowest levels of interest rates in decades, and low inflation. Agriculture and tourism have shown growth despite the global environment, and we are now seeing signs of resurgence in the productive sectors generally. We have developed a mechanism to facilitate sectoral discourse on national issues through the Partnership for Transformation. However, no debate on issues is truly complete without the input of the opposition. I extend my hand to the opposition to join us once more at the table. I believe that in areas where we have no disagreement, we should be prepared to hold hands for the national good. In areas of disagreement, there is no harm in continuing dialogue for the national good. So, as we stand on the eve of the next 50 years of our independence, and we commit to building on the achievements of the last 50 years, we must also commit to correct the errors of the past that continue to follow us. And we must commit to develop the courage and energy to chart new pathways to success. Today, I take responsibility for the direction of this country. Today, my generation must take responsibility for charting new pathways to fulfilling our destiny. Today, let us start a new ethos of responsibility in all Jamaicans for Jamaica. Let us start with fathers taking responsibility for their children. and parents deciding only to have children they can afford to have. Let us be responsible for the education of our children. There is no reason why in modern Jamaica a child should leave school illiterate. The environment is close to me. Let us take responsibility for how we dispose of our waste and the impact that it is having on our natural and built environment. We must take pride in where we live and take responsibility for public places, even though we don't own them individually. Music. We have given to the world an incredible gift. Music is a powerful tool in influencing the youth. Our artists must take responsibility for their lyrics, lest they mislead our youth. Now, I made sure to greet my colleagues in Parliament. One of the most difficult questions I've had to face when I was Minister of Education, and still hope to be, and leader of government business, was how can I ask teachers and students to maintain decorum in school when our parliamentarians do not maintain that decorum in Parliament? My brother parliamentarians, we must lead in this national call for responsibility. It is our moral duty. The pathway to responsibility is not one that is easily legislated or enforced. It is about a conscious decision to act rightly. That is the essence of public virtue. The ancients saw politics as the highest calling of man. It is what men do in the interest of the public good without thought for their personal benefit or threat of sanction. It is what we do because it is right, not because it is expedient. In this regard, our leaders must lead. Jamaica is yearning, crying out for a new politics to emerge. How can we be fully free when some of us are not even free to make our own choices on a ballot? How can we be fully free when some of us are not free to walk around the block for fear of crossing the line? Zones of political exclusion are incompatible with freedom, and aspects of our politics are an affront to liberty. It is time to end garrison politics. This will not happen overnight, and it should not happen by force. There must be consensus on the way in which this is done. both political parties have it within them to mutually agree to end the social construct of the garrison. Outside of a national consensus, the Parliament can pass and enforce specific laws to ensure and protect the free movement and campaign of political representatives in opposing garrison communities. The Parliament can also provide sanctions for breaches of the political code of conduct, to which both parties have already signed. It is important that people living in these areas get to see other political representatives without the objection of enforcers. Let us start the process by getting the leaders to work together in these areas of exclusion. I am willing to work with the leader of the opposition in Tower Hill. And I may just turn up in Whitfield Town. I will be writing to the leader of the opposition to invite her to discuss this important measure of coordinating access to closed communities for representatives of differing political persuasions. Hopefully, this small step will lead to other steps that will eventually remove garrisons from our political landscape. It is not only that the rest of Jamaica is locked out of these communities. I am concerned that the residents of these communities are locked off from the rest of Jamaica. They don't necessarily get the same level of service from the state as other citizens. Neither do they necessarily share the national outlook on important issues such as crime. We must seek to integrate all our citizens into the Jamaican society. They must share a common vision. We must guarantee them equal treatment and respect from the state, and they too will be emboldened to support our national stance against crime, corruption, and injustice. Criminals must never be seen by the community as protectors. Once there is an integrated and shared national vision, garrisons will no longer be havens for criminals. There are other casualties to the politics of exclusion. Independent-minded persons who form an increasingly large percentage of our population exclude themselves from a process they consider tribal and unthoughtful. As a result, some of our best talents avoid public service out of fear of being tainted by association. We must change that. It will not happen overnight, but we must commit ourselves to the emergence of a new political culture that will endear our best talents. A culture built on the supremacy of ideas and the public space for these ideas to contend. A culture built on a relentless focus on policies and less on personalities. Built on action and less on talk and rhetoric. Built on the principle of inclusivity and broad participation. The broader the participation, the better the quality of governance. The deeper the participation, the better the efficacy of government. Today, I make an appeal to all well-thinking Jamaicans, both here and in our beloved diaspora who would want to see this new culture emerge to join the process. If talented people make themselves available, I will make space for you in this government. Jamaica needs her talented sons and daughters in the public service for the public good now more than ever. Your contribution does not have to be in the political domain. Civil society, service clubs, chambers of commerce, school boards, citizens associations are all important to building a strong fabric of participatory governance. For too long, we have been distracted from the seriousness of our problems by petty politics. On both sides, the civility of our politics must improve. We must all pledge to elevate our political discourse. Our leaders must transcend petty, mean-spirited, tear-down politics. The time has come to erase the lines of demarcation that created garrisons, to open the doors that excluded, to transcend the pettiness that has distracted us. Our potential for prosperity has not been fully realized. This is the objective reality. While other countries in the Caribbean and elsewhere have seen economic indicators improve substantially, Jamaica has underperformed. The sad thing is that those who feel the burden of economic underperformance the most are the poor. Poverty has three main dimensions. The first is knowledge. The poor in any society usually have limited access to education. Indeed, that's one of the reasons why they are poor. The first step in fighting poverty is not to say that I love the poor. Were that enough, we would have no poor people. I love the poor, but I hate poverty. The first step in fighting poverty is giving access to education. There is no educated country that is poor. The government will continue to expand access to education at the early childhood level and at the secondary level. In the last 4 years, we have moved from 72% to 82% of students of secondary age enrolling in high school up to grade 11. A target of this administration is to achieve universal secondary education early in the next decade. This means that all youth in Jamaica must complete at least 5 years of secondary education and have a certificate to show. If we accomplish this, we would have eliminated one of the main factors that keep people poor. My parents are here today, and as a personal testimony, I did not come from a privileged background, but my parents invested heavily in education. Education is the greatest investment in breaking intergenerational poverty. I am where I am today because of education. I encourage all Jamaicans, especially the poor, to make the sacrifice and invest in the education of your children. The second dimension of poverty is access to state services, such as health care and proper shelter. Our government has made a commitment to free access to health care. There are many persons who previously would have opted to remain untreated, ailing in their bed at home, who are now being cared for in our health service. As a result, the quality of their life has improved. We have increased benefits and expanded our social safety net for the poor. I have heard many praises for the PATH program. But I've also heard complaints as well. I believe it is now time to review the PATH program to make sure that eligible and needy persons are not excluded. The third dimension of poverty is income and employment. While the absolute poor are unemployed, we must acknowledge that in Jamaica, the working poor is a major concern. The poor need meaningful, not short-term, not one day, not crash work. The poor need meaningful employment. At this time, I want to take the Jamaican people into my confidence. I'm going to tell you the truth about our economy, and I'm going to leave it to your good judgment to decide. This is a good time to talk about the national debt. Over the last 40 years, we have lived on borrowed money. During our independent history, no one has ever forced us to borrow. We are a sovereign nation, and we have chosen to borrow. For many years, we have kept our budget For many years, we have kept on our budget certain state enterprises which, while providing jobs, lost money continuously. These losses have been funded with debt. Over many years, as a country, we have borrowed for all kinds of projects, but not all the borrowings have been used for the designated purpose. The proceeds of some of our borrowing have leaked due to corruption, poor management, bureaucracy, and some have been wasted on ill-conceived ideas. The logic of borrowing should be that the funds are used in a manner that will generate more revenue in the future from which debt can be repaid. However, we now borrow in order to repay previous borrowings. We are caught in a vicious cycle of borrowing to the point where, for more than a decade, the size of our debt has been larger than the value of what we produce each year. The truth is that we cannot continue to borrow indefinitely as a palliative for short-term gratification of social needs. That is the truth. It has fallen to my generation to confront this problem. What will we do? The government has developed a practical plan to gradually reduce the debt while maintaining its support for the most vulnerable in the society. The first strategy in borrowing less is getting more revenue. And the first strategy in getting more revenue is increasing the efficiency and simplicity of our tax administration and incentive systems. We have to build a fairer, broader, and less burdensome tax system that spreads the taxation burden equitably and promotes compliance. In May of this year, our government tabled a green paper on tax reform, which is being discussed by stakeholders. I am confident that we can reach agreement on a reformed tax system. Another strategy in borrowing less is managing our expenditure. A large and growing part of public expenditure is our wage bill. Public sector wages have always been a vexed issue, not just here in Jamaica. We watch closely the happenings in other more advanced economies, and we can all be proud as Jamaicans that while our unions have been tough negotiators, for the most part, they have acted responsibly. The government is now in dialogue with the unions and other stakeholders to come up with a consensus position on managing wage expectations. I know the unions understand the situation the country faces, and I'm hopeful for a positive outcome. While we ask public sector workers and their unions to moderate expectations, the government must reduce wastage, inefficiency, bureaucracy, corruption, and profligacy in its own house as part of the expenditure management strategy. In the same way that I know households are now cutting and economizing to maintain their standard of living, so it is that the government must become more efficient in delivering public service. As we have done in the Ministry of Education, we have identified areas of wastage, and by the use of technology and the implementation of more efficient business processes, we were able to turn wastage into savings, which were used elsewhere in the system to provide additional service. In spite of budget compression in the Ministry of Education, we were still able to provide even greater service delivery. This government will take a microscope to public expenditure. We cannot afford wastage and corruption. Ultimately, this ends up being a burden on the poor. Important to all of this must be a disciplined approach to the management of our fiscal accounts. Now, when we hear of fiscal discipline, we are conditioned to think austerity. If we have fiscal discipline as a feature of our economic management, then there is no need for austerity measures. We have already started to develop the basis for fiscal discipline with the passing of legislation to create fiscal responsibility framework. We are already in a program with a plan that is designed to restructure, rationalize, and bring greater equity and efficiency to our economy and the public sector. We are very close to once and for all breaking this vicious debt cycle. If we complete the program and stick to our plan, we would be able to moderate our expenditure, increase our revenue, and as a result, reduce our debt. Once we reduce our debt, then we will have more to spend on sustainable programs to eliminate poverty from our society. Fiscal discipline means that the government will stick to the plans it has laid and agreed with our domestic and international partners. Oftentimes, these plans require our stakeholders to make sacrifices for future gains. How this plays out politically does not always empower governments to maintain discipline. The electorate sometimes are left out of the discussion or are misled by rhetoric in our intensely competitive political climate. This can lead to demands and expectations that lead us only back to debt as a solution. In a democracy, governments cannot ignore the views of the people. Our politicians must therefore be brave enough to tell the electorate the truth and be prepared to engage them in robust discussions about the path that we have embarked on. We must say unequivocally, there is a limit to borrowing, and more debt is not the solution to poverty. If we veer from this path, or depart from fiscal discipline, or hesitate to complete the journey, all the sacrifices we have already made in JDX and the public sector divestment, and all the reforms and negotiations would have been for naught. We have come too far to turn back now. Let us decide here and now to once and for all get a handle on our debt problem. There is no other way. So how do we create jobs? We are well on our way to sustainable and meaningful job creation. We have set the macro preconditions for investment and growth with stable exchange rate, stable interest rates, and low inflation. Our next task is to resolve the microeconomic environment for business. While we do this, we are already seeing signs of modest growth. There are some key elements of the microeconomic agenda that I would like to highlight. The first is that we must increase the productivity of our labor force. Economic growth is closely correlated to labor productivity, and labor productivity is closely related to training. We must train our people. Almost all the business people I meet complain about the convoluted and frustrating bureaucracy they encounter in doing business in Jamaica. Where there is inefficient bureaucracy, the cost of doing business increases, and corruption and cronyism will flourish. We must stamp out inefficient bureaucracy from our country. The high cost of energy is a universal cry across all divides in Jamaica. This government has developed an energy policy. However, we must act swiftly in implementation. I believe it is universally agreed that Jamaica must diversify its energy sources and create competitive markets for the provision of electricity. this government is committed to the transformation of the energy sector. Our government must become more aggressive, more prospecting, and more proactive in seeking investment. Creating the macro and micro environment for investment is not enough. Sometimes it is the handshake that seals the deal. You know, it's a wide world out there, and Jamaica is a small country. 1% of the gross international foreign direct investment globally could significantly solve Jamaica's problems. Let us start prospecting for opportunities. With our current fiscal constraint, there are certain viable investment projects for which government cannot financially be involved in the upfront capital expenditure. But this creates an opportunity for the private sector to partner with the government in creating and utilizing such assets as land, resource rights, or taking advantage of other already programmed streams of recurrent expenditure on public services. This provides an avenue for the government to maintain fiscal discipline while pursuing critical infrastructure projects that do not put the government in more debt, but at the same time creating meaningful, sustained employment for this country. With all of this, I am optimistic that we will see increased and sustained investment in Jamaica. I am certain that we are doing the right things to support the economy to create jobs. Jamaica is poised for takeoff in growth and development. The people are central to all our development activities, and the poor and vulnerable are the focus of our social support. Jamaica must take its place in the world. We can be productive, booming, and wealthy like all other nations in the world. We must apply imagination and not limit ourselves. We must think big and act smart. We must be pragmatic, prospective, and pursue opportunities. We are a people of great destiny, and we have much to be proud. Let us take a decisive break from those elements of our past that have held us back, and let us commit to building on the successes of our forefathers. Let us end poverty in our society. Let us create wealth. Let us build a society where if you play by the rules, you will succeed. Let us create a society that if you are good at what you do, no matter where you start in life, you will achieve. Let us achieve universal literacy and universal secondary education. Let us diversify our energy and infrastructure sources. Let us ensure that those who commit crimes are assured punishment. Let us create a simple, efficient, broader, and less burdensome tax system. Let us build a society where our youth can be optimistic about their future. Let us make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. I want you to understand that the sum total of our potential exceeds our problems, that our collective capabilities are greater than our challenges. But it is only through participation that these capabilities and this potential can be seized, harnessed, and realized for the good of Jamaica. I know we can do it. I know we can practice a better politics. I know a better politics with broader participation and honest conversation with the electorate will lead to better and more sustainable policies to manage our economy and create jobs and opportunities. This is how we create a better Jamaica. Better politics, better policies, better people. I know the days ahead will not be easy, but I ask God to hold my hands, light my path, give me wisdom, empathy, and courage. I have found a few words in which I take comfort. They are credited to Mother Teresa. It reflects how I have lived my life, and it sums up how I intend to conduct myself in office. It is called the Paradoxical Commandments. It reads, "People are sometimes unreasonable, irrational, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of being selfish or having ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are successful, no doubt, you will win some unfaithful friends and some genuine enemies. Succeed anyway. If you are honest and sincere, people may deceive you. Be honest and sincere anyway. What you spend years creating, others could destroy overnight. Create anyway. If you find sincerity and happiness, some may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good that you do today will often be forgotten. Do good anyway. Give the best you have, and it will never be good enough. Give your best anyway. I pledge to give my best, and with faithful prayers and hard work, we will succeed. May God bless you, and God bless Jamaica.